Thanks for tuning in to the Peoplz Dragons. The following presentation is the result of active players in the community who dictate the actions of these characters by way of the Peoplz Dragons interactive RPG game show. If you're enjoying the content, then please like, share, and maybe subscribe. If you want to join in on the action, visit our website at pndrpg.com. Haven City, a gigantic megalopolis that covers 1/4 of the entire continent, inhabited by disgusting, vile, and ignorant life forms that if it weren't for the advanced tech level this civilization has achieved, it would have decayed and imploded hundreds of years ago. I feel there is an unknown entity orchestrating the chaos, but has ultimately left us to perish by our own hand. Our existence is cancerous and ugly. After the Great Gamma Calamity occurred, an event that would claim thousands of lives over a short period of time, citizens have struggled to coexist amongst each other. The mysterious explosion spread gamma radiation throughout the entire city, causing every living creature to mutate. This new phenomenon has hurled us into a new dark age that casts away law and order and has flipped the entire system we were all accustomed to onto its head, and replaced it with a hierarchy reminiscent of a food chain. The effects that the gamma had on our DNA varied, affecting every creature differently, and one thing was for certain: not all gamma types are equal. Bizarre abilities, talents, and latent power began to manifest within each of us, and no longer were we measured by our class in society. Your spot on the food chain is heavily dependent on what you were capable of. Couldn't shoot lasers from your eyes or spit acid from your mouth, you'd better know how to hack a close frequency intranquilometer or know how to hide real good. In Haven, many gamma types form alliances in order to survive, defend themselves, and sustain dominance over each other. Everyone else who are deemed inferior spend their entire lives trying to exist within the crossfire. How will you choose to exist? In Haven City, the ugly city. We see two people, man and woman, cradling an infant standing inside of their living room, dim lit by an old-style fireplace that actually uses firewood. The older woman appears tense and stressed out as she stares into the fire. Cradling the infant, the old man comforts her and shares his optimism for the situation. This woman is Dekal Fishlu, the headmaster and doctor of a private gamma-type orphanage. She and her husband, who is a G-type 1, have been nursing an infant who is the first of its kind. Being born a gamma-type has never happened and is the first successful birth of 523 accounted to date since the Gamma Calamity. Currently, children are being born as abominations, or the mothers are becoming abominations during labor and dying. A mass mutation even occurred in the South Haven Hospital a week ago, which would have created a gamma fiend if it were not handled by gate member Judge Benedict. Dr. Fishlu is worried that the adoption arrangements may not go as planned. Computer hackers have leaked information on the child's whereabouts, including the orphanage itself, endangering them and the child's lives. Dr. Fishlu has harbored them here, as he and his wife have searched for a suitable place for them to live and grow. Her wife calms her and explains that between their two prospects, Makai Funoichi of Funoichi Inc. and Tempus of the Gate Center, one will be able to handle the responsibility. Dr. Fishlu looks into his eyes in appreciation for his positivity, when suddenly her eyes widen. Confused by Dr. Fishlu's sudden urgency, Mr. Fishlu spots a bright burning reflection of flames on her glasses, and it certainly wasn't the fireplace that bright and big. Dr. Fishlu commands her husband to hurry and protect them. He turns around to see a young man no older than 20, completely covered in flames, flying toward the window of their home until he crashes right through it, causing a fiery explosion. With majority of the living room exposed to the outside gusts of wind, the flames begin to grow and swallow half of the home. The young man lands to his feet softly. The flames around him dissipate, revealing a highly advanced uniform comprised of specially made chemicals that appear to provide some sort of support and ignite flame. His hair colors turn from a fiery red to a softer brown as the remaining flames die out from his shoulders. He takes one step forward and says, "I, Kai Excalibur, accept the responsibilities of being the father of this child. I won't be signing anything, though." Dr. Fishlu hands Mr. Fishlu the infant and pleads for him to leave and protect them. He takes a long look at his wife, then begins to run toward the nursery, but not before a giant pillar of fire bursts from under him, sending him and the baby flying into the air. He protects the baby as he twirls towards the ground on flames, but is scooped up by his collar of his shirt by Kai Excalibur. Kai snatches the infant from his arms, then with the other arm ignites Mr. Fishlu's robe on fire and Buster swings him into the painting above the fireplace as bones snap from hitting the wall that hard. Dr. Fishlu holds out a large metal artifact up and in front of her, pointing it towards Kai, and lets out a powerful shout. Kai's entire body is struck with a crippling pain as his skin begins to turn gray, and everything including his clothing begins to lose its color in place of shades of gray. Kai can't help but release his grip on the baby as he is brought to the ground, then to his knees by Dr. Fishlu's Gem of Petrify, a magical stone that she enchanted herself. Kai begins to feel his knees turn to stone, and it becomes harder and harder to move. Dr. Fishlu runs over to grab the baby with one hand while holding up the artifact with the other. Just as she's able to get her hand on the infant, Kai Excalibur's hair once again turns red, and he erupts into a brutal gout of flame that blows Dr. Fishlu back and causes more of the house to crumble. Mr. Fishlu manages to free himself from his burning robe and hobbles over to Dr. Fishlu. Dr. Fishlu looks into her husband's eyes and tells him to save them. With her dying breath, she places one last enchantment on Mr. Fishlu himself, causing him to glow with the bright light. Kai then gently scoops up the infant and glares at Mr. Fishlu and his now dead wife. Mr. Fishlu looks at Kai, then looks at the baby and hesitates. He then turns around and runs back towards the nursery as commanded. Kai smiles and says, "I'll take that as an agreement." He then raises his hand as giant fireballs begin to rain from the sky, destroying the entire home and the forest that surrounded it. He then flies away with the orphan, leaving a blazing trail that eventually fizzles out in the night sky. We see a middle-aged Dorinthian man standing in a living room turned into a makeshift armory. He's suited in a Kevlar assortment of medium battle gear +2, and is cleaning a blood-soaked machete blade. This man was none other than the Thriller, a vigilante warrior for the innocent. Him and his son fight crime and defend the people of this district with an array of guns, explosives, and his ability to create advanced alien vehicles with his mind. This was his base of operations, and currently is preparing to finish the task he started last night. He had single-handedly wiped out 4 of the worst mutant antagonists in his district in attempts to reach the worst of them all, and tonight it was shine time. He finishes preparing his guns when he turns to the TV and tunes into the news. Obviously, this is either some kind of prank or public statement, and just frankly, we have more important shit to worry about. Angsty teenagers are always loitering in graveyards and rob graves. Now please, move out of my way. We see a large, bulky officer shove the reporter and her cameraman aside with ease. The reporter shouts, "Damn it, those are People's loved ones!" The officer looks extremely aggy and turns around and shouts, "That morgue is gonna be refilled really soon, lady! Get the fuck out of my way!" The Thriller begins laughing and says, "Damn right those morgues are gonna get filled up tonight. Real soon." A younger man walks into the room with a blanket full of high-tech blaster rifles and fusion grenades and lays them on the table. His 26-year-old son and protege, Trill Billy, was not a Gamma Type 1. However, is a master marksman and karate expert. The Thriller believes that soon his son will unlock his power if he keeps bringing him onto the battlefield with him. Trill Billy and the Thriller lost a loved one from the war that's taking place in their district and have both vowed to themselves to disperse the evil. The Thriller and Trill Billy fully equip themselves, and just before opening the front door to leave, they give each other their own signature handshake called the Adrenaline Hex, a series of gestures taught to them by a witch doctor that they saved a few days back. The Adrenaline Hex raises their adrenaline at peak heights and is fueled by their father-son bond of justice and without the negative long-term effects. On the final wrist bump, their muscles bulge and thousands of veins inflate as they jerk and shake from the grotesque and dark transformation taking place. Once complete, they pick up their gun bags and open the front door, then halt. Standing before them and looking up at the 2 beefed-up soldiers, we see Six inhaling a whole cigarette nervously as he looks overtaken with excitement at what he sees. There before him, the faint flicker of a powerful persona looming over the Thriller's crown chakra. Confused, the Thriller looks up and around himself to see where Six is looking, when suddenly, Trill Billy points a long pistol at Six. "Who are you?" Six's eyes move from the glorious prize and slowly settle onto the gun pointed in his face. The Thriller sharply asks, "Why are you here, kid? Run along!" Six quickly reaches into his sleeve. Then Trill Billy shouts, "I will shoot you, stranger!" Six begins to smile and starts to purposely rummage through his sleeve, taunting Trill Billy's nerves. The Thriller shouts, "No!" as Trill Billy fires a beam of crimson light from the gun. The camera cuts to Six grinning as a card appears floating in front of his face, revealing itself. He says, "You fell for my trap card." Trill Billy and his gun are both shrunken in midair to the size of an action figure, creating a long fall to the wood floor. Trill Billy crashes hard, breaking his arm in half. He's so small his screams barely penetrate the walls of the room. The Thriller reacts and summons an advanced alien gun turret that morphs and unfolds from the ground up and out of thin air. Its incandescent alloy shell glistens and mobilizes as it builds up and around the Thriller, the seat with the gun controls already in their respective places. Before Thriller could even begin firing, Six draws 3 cards invoking all of them at once. Reach of the Hungry Goblin, Snare of the Bone Hunter, and Shift Gigma, the Tower Destroyer. The Thriller lets go of the gun controls uncontrollably. Thriller begins to fight for control of his own arms as they gain sentience and begin to take on a fiendish appearance when finally one hand grips into his head with its thumb dug all the way into his own eye socket. The thriller, screaming, still full of adrenaline, begins to struggle against himself in the cockpit of his alien gun turret, when out of nowhere, a chain made of various odd-shaped bones snare and entangle his ankles, snatching and pulling him right out of the gun turret, leaving him dangling from his living room ceiling, while his other arm begins throwing brutal, skull-crushing blows, fracturing and caving in the left side of his face. A giant muscular arm breaks through the walls, reaches and grabs the thriller, ripping him from the snare of the bone hunter and destroying the entire floor of the building in the process as it pulls him out of the complex, tight in its grip. A giant 4-story tall demon covered in short fur with the face of a flat-faced dog with bulging awkward eyes, Shif-Gigma, the tower destroyer, holds the thriller captive in its grip. Battered, bloodied, and beaten, the thriller peers through the one swollen eye he has left as he sees Six appear from behind the ear of the Shif-Gigma and slides down its long neck. With no words, Six pulls out a large blank scroll and places it down on the surface of the demon's arm. Six then holds out a broken up Trill Billy in anguish and places him on the scroll. Shif-Gigma brings the thriller closer, holding his entire body like a raw carrot. Six peers up at the thriller's persona and lets out a shriek of excitement you'd only hear from a maniac as he lifts his foot up and stomps on Trill Billy's body, crushing him entirely. The camera zooms in on the thriller's swollen eye as it widens, and we see a splatter of blood in the reflection of his bloodshot pupils. Six seals the immense essence of the persona into the blood-soaked scroll swiftly and kneels to roll it up and stows it away into his coat. He then gestures towards the Shif-Gigma to toss the thriller, and so Shif-Gigma flings the thriller into the side of a distant building 100 yards away, dead. We see a young and beautiful Solian receptionist. Her long dreaded locks wrapped and braided into an elegant arrangement. Her smooth bronze Solian skin, tempered by the hot sun from the desert sands, shimmered under the light of the chandelier that sat above the receptionist's desk of a fancy South Haven hotel that hovers over a giant purple lake that this district was known for. Off in the distance, we see a tall, nimble and lanky young fellow in a dapper suit, hoisting a black bag over his shoulder, and looks to be admiring her from afar. Seth Harrow, also of the Solian race, with a perfect symmetrical face and a clean short cut, approaches tactfully when suddenly he sees an older, snobby and uptight elderly man coming to relieve her of her shift. But this doesn't faze Seth, he continues. He arrives to the desk and the receptionist greets him. Seth explains that he is a visitor from outside of the district and has come for a tour of the Almighty Digital. The Almighty Digital is a giant digital clock of the old days that extends way high in the sky and is amongst the tallest buildings in all of Haven, making this hotel exceptionally iconic. The receptionist scoffs at the idea of a tour and says, "I've ran this place for 77 years and not once has the Almighty Digital ever been made permissible by the public. Now, will you be renting a room or not?" The camera cuts to Seth's face, looking slightly disturbed, but still confident. The camera cuts 10 minutes later to a doorway on the roof of the hotel, and through it walks the receptionist, happily showing Seth the way to the Almighty Digital. "And here's the roof, good sir. And up that hatch over there is how you'll find yourself behind the clock structure. But be careful, it's a lot of ways you can fall over there, okay? And don't shoot anyone with that gun." Seth makes his way up the hatch and settles himself behind a platform providing half cover. He then unpacks his bag, placing multiple parts and attachments together until it forms a future sight rifle. Only a few of its kind, this sniper rifle used to be attached to a mechanoid, giant mechs piloted by disembodied heads of gifted video game players, used in the military at one point in time. Through its scope, one can see so far and remains so accurate that old veterans would joke and say they could see their retirement when peering through it. Seth looks through the future sight rifle and focuses his sights on a rooftop of a peculiar building all the way over in the far edge of the adjacent district. He then sees a bright green light that everyone's been talking about flash into existence as a medium-sized, unidentified hovering object uncloaks from thin air. Entering the roof from the stairway, a group of shady armed guards can be seen escorting humans in a single file line toward the ship, where they are then beamed up and out of their clothing, vanishing completely. Seth's eyes widen as he has never seen anything like this craft and its capabilities. He then refocuses and adjusts the volume on his earphones to pick up the conversation the guards are having.
What are we waiting for, man? We're waiting for HG to bring the last one, man. Okay, man.
Pulling out a very expensive device that gathers information, Seth looks into HG because it sounds extremely familiar to him. Turns out, HG is nicknamed for Hunter Galsvig, a wanted agent by a cabal of assassins that hasn't been seen for the past 11 years. Hunter Galsvig is a large 400-plus pound slob of a man who comes wobbling up the steps onto the roof out of breath, dragging a malnourished and unconscious teenager over to the trooper, who begins to drag him over to the glowing UFO. Seth thinks to himself that perhaps he has stumbled upon a mountain of valuable information tonight. Suddenly, several rapid-fire, high-caliber sniper rounds zip across the sky, taking out each and every guard by way of headshot in seconds. Seth pulls his eye off of the scope to see where it came from. He adjusts his sights and sees Anarchy's bishop sniping from a window. The queen and king of the king's hand land on top of the ship, causing it to wobble from the heavy weight of the king, who stabs its massive kite shield into the roof of the craft and emits a destructive magnetic jamming pulse that causes the glow of the ship to fade and power down, falling onto the rooftop. Hunter Galsov backs up and begins to run, but runs directly into Anarchy, who shoves the large man back 15 yards with his enhanced strength from his exoskeleton suit. The immense force sends Hunter tumbling and leaving him in bad shape. Seth begins to look up information on this individual and identifies him as Seth Masters from facial recognition, but not a single record on file other than his character sheet on www.pndrpg.com. Anarchy 12 gives the signal, and the Queen slices open the alien craft. Out fall hundreds of collected Gamma-type zeros diced up into easy-to-fit cubes, along with the small green alien that Anarchy had encountered before. Seth pulls his eyes away from the scope and rubs them as he can't believe what he's seeing. Is it a mutant? Is that a costume? He looks back into the scope to see closer and eavesdrop. The green alien immediately recognizes Anarchy and hops up on its feet and begins to push its telepathic fear wave onto Anarchy. But it's ineffective. Anarchy looks at the alien with an expression of being completely offended that it would even attempt such an attack like that on him again, and signals towards the king. The king swiftly appears behind the alien, grabs, lifts it up by its arm, and snaps it in half with the force of its grip. The alien lets out a scream so loud that it can be heard in the next district, forcing Seth Harrow to pull out his earphones. Anarchy walks up to the alien and says, "There's so much we need to talk about." The king then bashes the entire alien's body into its shield, knocking it out completely. Seth pulls away from the scope, speechless from what he's seeing, but remains calm and collected. He watches Anarchy 12 toss the alien corpse onto the night, Anarchy's android steed, and he and the king's hand fly away toward Section 12, taking with them the alien craft, but leaving Hunter behind. Seth looks intently at the scene while he makes a phone call for an ambulance to come pick up Hunter, and then he takes pictures of the trafficked humans on the roof. Seth is always steps ahead, and he's already found a way to weaponize his information. The next morning, we see Tempus in the back of his limousine solo on the way to the orphanage, listening to his video messages. His assistant appears in hologram form in front of him.
Good morning, Gordon. I have all the paperwork already submitted. At this point, the orphan will be all ours, unless someone else with the credentials decides they also want to adopt, but I doubt it. Don't mess this up. The thought of an infant being raised by the Gate Center would not only be great for publicity, but would bring warmth and happiness to our holidays. So don't let us down,
she says sarcastically. Tempus laughs to himself. He's amused at how much this means to his assistant and how she presents it as an asset. His assistant winks at him and says that she'll be at the center tonight to see the child's homecoming. Then the hologram flickers out. Tempus's limo arrives to the Fishlu residence, now a crime scene. Arriving at the same time, and just as perplexed, we see Makai Funoichi getting out of a passenger side of a fancy sports car. Officers, paramedics, and firemen can be seen scurrying around the crime scene, questioning witnesses and securing the area. Makai and Tempus group and discuss their reasons for being there, both being the same: to adopt the orphan. An injured and smoky Mr. Fishlu limps out and approaches them wrapped up in a blanket, escorted by a paramedic. He thanks them both for their interest in adopting the orphan and asks if they could follow him off into the nursery, which is located in the portion of the home that was spared by the flames of Kai Excalibur. Mr. Fishlu walks them over to the closed nursery door and stops. He turns around and with a long face of regret says, "I'm afraid we have not been entirely honest in our adoption parameters." Makai and Tempus, confused, inquire about what happened to this place. Mr. Fishlu explains that the orphan was taken by a Gamma Type 1 who rained fire and fury from the sky upon him and his wife and killed her in the process. Makai looks infuriated and informs him that the child will be found and the captor brought down. Mr. Fishlu informs Makai that there is something else and opens the door slowly into the nursery. Tempus and Makai follow him into the room where they arrive to 2 cradles with infants in each of them. Out of fear of ruining the chance of adoption, we suppressed the fact that the orphan was one of 3 special triplets, and we had hoped that we could explain the complexity of raising them together in person with the adopters. My wife has studied gamma types since the Great Gamma Calamity began and has gained some in-depth knowledge of how the gamma has infected these 3 children. Mr. Fishlu explains that each child embodies a mysterious aura that they have yet to understand. They are too young to conduct true tests on, and we grew close to them, naturally, since we began to care for them for the past 6 months after their mother died from complications of birth. Mr. Fishlu hands Tempus and Makai pictures of the mother. Mr. Fishlu then bows his head to Makai, performing a traditional Dorinthian gesture that accompanies a proposition of a grave request. "Please, Mr. Fuenaichi, please, Tempus, you both have establishments and the resources to bring these girls up in Haven." Tempus can see and feel a cloud of desperation filled to the brim with sorrow as it rains a vibrant green upon him, drenching his blanket in grief. It was moments like this that Tempus wished he wasn't so in tune with emotions. Tempus offers to adopt both of them. Makai states that works perfectly because he's going to adopt the one that was kidnapped and for Fishlu to have the papers ready tonight. Fishlu stops him, pushing Makai's phone hand downward slowly. "Hear me out," the old man murmurs. "They cannot remain together anyway. It's better that way." Makai asks him to elaborate. "They cannot remain together because it causes terrible things to happen in their area. Very, very bad omens. We noticed strange coincidental occurrences when they were brought to one place, and even more strange events when apart, but none nearly as serious and grave as when they are together. This is why it's such a great responsibility. We were passing through the exact district hours before the first Gamma Fiend emerged. In fact, it walked through and terrorized the same districts we passed through to get home before it was stopped. It was practically following us, the children. We've been keeping one away from the other two, and that was the one that was coincidentally taken. I feel it is calculated by fate. Makai and Tempus look at each other. The camera cuts to Makai walking into the clan's headquarters. Beautiful Dorinthian women flutter around Makai, trying to get a closer look at the baby girl. Makai brings everyone around to greet the new member of their family. Someone shouts asking what her name is. Makai thinks for a second, and just before saying it, a clansman rushes up to him holding a phone out. "Sir, it's the assassin." Makai's entire mood changes. We cut to Makai entering the ceremonial burial grounds made for his recently fallen brothers and sisters to rest, laying on decorative laying on decorative slabs of gold draped in lavish garb. His father, Nagin, in his decorative armor, at the head of the room on a pedestal adorned in roaring dragon decoration. Makai takes the phone off hold and greets the assassin for hire when he is met with a very, very familiar voice.
"So, the Funiichi clan is still alive and kicking, huh?"
The familiar voice resonates within Makai, catching him totally off guard. Makai confusingly says, "Kyrie?" We cut to Tempus, arriving back to the gate center surrounded by members of all ages there to greet him and the new youngest member of the gate center. Judge Benedict arrives to Tempus' side, helping him with bags and the baby in absence of Tempus' assistant. Tempus asks Judge if he's heard from her since this morning, to which Judge says no. Tempus looks over to R-Type X, who is in the corner meditating with his earphones in. Tempus then asks Judge if R-Type X could have spoken to her, but Judge says that R-Type X has been meditating all day. Later that night, we see Tempus carrying the child while watching the news.
My father was the only mutant in that damn district that did anything during the Gamma Fiend attack. He saved hundreds of you, and this is how he's honored, by being dug up?"
The interview was suddenly cut short because the reporter has received word of a special announcement from the governor, and the camera feed is switched over to Governor Advocate's home. The camera zooms in on the governor of Haven, and we see Advocate standing at a podium outside of his home in front of a large crowd full of press, media, and general citizens, all happy to see their governor today. Advocate was very entertaining to watch, and ratings skyrocketed for any media outlet he blessed. Whenever Advocate made public announcements, he would always do something that would have the city talking for weeks on end. Advocate waves his hand and grins with his large, perfect teeth, then asks everyone to simmer down. "I was sitting in my home watching my favorite anime until I received a phone call from someone who did something for me so great that it gave me an idea that I wanted to share with you all. So I had my terrific staff set up this stage out front here. Are you all ready to hear my wonderful idea?" The crowd cheers. "I said, are y'all ready to hear my idea?" He points over to a famous drummer, Big Finger God, known for his big mutant arms. Advocate was a big fan, and BFG was a big Advocate supporter. BFG begins slamming the drums, getting everyone riled up. Advocate tells everyone to be quiet. "My idea is to have Advocate's Hero of the Day, where every day I will award someone with that title, and we can have a lunch at Sandwich Maven's Haven." Pow! How about that? The crowd goes crazy. Another night-skinned man, almost as handsome as Advocate, hops up on the stage and asks, "Well, how does one get the Hero of the Day award?" Advocate turns and points across the stage to a shiny metallic humanoid who had just landed after disengaging its jet boot. He lands heavily onto the stage, causing the whole stage to shake. His head and face was a shiny metallic surface and donned a single visor, emitting a yellow light. Why don't we ask Advocate's Hero of the Month himself? Advocate walks up to the person and places his hand on his shoulder and says, "Hero to my right, introduce yourself, will you?" The being emits a static-filled mess of radio frequencies, and the only thing intelligible was the revelation of its name, Goliath Mod. Ah, Goliath Mod. And Goliath Mod, what have you done to become my hero of the day? Goliath Mod turns to the crowd and whips out, in front of the audience, the head of Tempest's assistant. Blood from the shreddings of torn neck flesh splash across the shocked and disgusted faces of onlooking citizens. The captain of Advocate's law enforcers puts his hand over his face in complete disgust and shame. Advocate peers out and looks past the sea of people who are silent and stunned and points right into the camera. We cut to Tempest, looking into the television screen, staring back into the golden eyes of the night-skinned demon with a mix of emotions culminating inside of him. Advocate speaks into the mic and says, "If you want to be my hero of the day tomorrow, I want Anarchy XII's head on a plate." He then drops the microphone and walks off the stage and back into his home. The camera cuts to the halls deep within the Roaring Dragon's quarters, as we then pan through the winding stairs down into the catacombs and into the ceremonial burial room where Makai was earlier. We see piles of garb and lavish decorations strewn about the floor of the chamber, as all of the corpses belonging to the clan's fallen soldiers, including Nagin, are missing. Thanks for watching Peoplz Dragons, the interactive RPG game show. I encourage everyone to jump into our comment section to participate in the lore contests, as well as visit our Patreon page to learn what perks come with your support for our machine. Peace.